So we're reading from third canto, chapter 25. Who's speaking? Do you remember? Just chapter 25. Who's the main speaker?
Mother and son.
Mother and son. That's a good hint. Now, who's the son? Kapila. And the mother? Devahuti. Right, I knew you knew it. Okay, great. So, this is chapter 25. This is the glories of devotional service. And we're reading 25 to 27. Is that correct? Okay, I wasn't sure all of them. So this verse, anybody inclined to memorize verses, this is a really good verse. Chapter 3, it's an easy one to remember too. 3:25, 25. It's Kapila Dev. It's like the glories of the association. So we'll when we start. Thank you for that reminder. I appreciate that. We'll read through all the verses and then come back to 25. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Naram. Let's do it together. Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Hirayan Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevayam Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Naistiki. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and Srila Prabhupada, the translator and commentator, by regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service unto your pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is also completely destroyed. The loving service unto the personality of Godhead is established as an irrevocable fact. Do you know why we start with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya? Why we start with the prayer to Lord Vasudeva? Everything has a meaning, you know. So the reason that we start with praying to Vasudeva, because Lord Vasudeva is the Lord of consciousness. So we're praying to him that for a few things, that we'll be able to fix our consciousness on what we're about to hear, that our consciousness will become purified by what we hear. So that's why we do that. Okay, 35. Om Aginati Midandasya Jinanjana Sulakaya Chaksu Samjena Tasmai Shuravainaha. I was born in complete ignorance. My spiritual master very kindly forced open my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. It's a debt that I owe to him for that I can never ever repay. But I hope I have the opportunity to keep trying. Life after life, millions of lives, however, forever, for eternity. Okay, 25. All right. Somebody like to? Yeah, thanks.
In the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. While cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed, and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin.
So do you have any preliminary thoughts on that verse? Anything that struck you there? We are going to come back to it, but anything? Yes.
Without devotees, we're just dreaming.
We need it. We need the devotees. That's true. Yeah. Any other impressions? Immediate impressions? I like the fact where it said, by cultivating such knowledge. Association of devotees is also a cultivation and cultivating the knowledge. It doesn't happen just automatically. We have to make our endeavor. Okay, let's go on. 26.
Thus, consciously engaged in devotional service and the association of devotees, a person gains distaste for sense gratification, both in this world and in the next. by constantly thinking about the activities of the Lord. This process of Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of mystic power. When one is actually situated on that path of devotional service, he is able to control the mind.
Control of the mind, not an easy task, but by that one is by consciously focusing our thoughts and our absorption on Krishna, then one is able to control the mind. That's the easiest way to control the mind. This is confirmed in a Bhagavad Gita verse. Anybody know the verse there, that first sentence? Thus, consciously engaged in devotional service in the association of devotees, a person gains distaste for sense gratification. The lower taste is easily given up. Because why? That's the one I was looking for. Param drishtva nivartate. Param drishtva. There's a higher taste. In other words, we're not stressing. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't do. Might sound like they were stressing those things, but actually, those are the secondary things. But what we try to stress is hear and chant about Krishna. Chant enthusiastically in the kirtan. Chant your rounds enthusiastically. You know what I mean? Try to hear. By getting that higher taste, then the lower taste does what it does. It's lower, so it goes away. Okay, 27.
Thus, by not engaging in service of the modes of material nature, but by developing Krishna consciousness, knowledge and renunciation, and by practicing yoga, in which the mind is always fixed in devotional service under the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one achieves my association in this very life, for I am the Supreme Personality. That's the truth.
That's quite a remarkable statement there. That one, by fixing their mind on the Lord and by engaging in His service, etc., one can reach the Supreme Personality, achieve His association in this very life. If you think of when you're doing your study of Bhagavad Gita and you're in the middle 6 chapters there, oh no, the first 6 chapters where it explains we're about karma yoga and the different processes of yoga. Those processes of yoga take a long time to perfect. Karma yoga, jnana yoga. Jnana yoga starts with, you can't start on the path of jnana yoga until you take sannyas. So that leaves a few of us out of the picture. And but starting, that's the starting point, renouncing everything. So that process, it takes a long time to perfect. But the process of Krishna consciousness, by this process of param drishtva nivartate, in developing a higher taste, one can achieve the highest perfection in this very life. It's quite an amazing statement. So let's go back to 25. That's the one that we concentrate on. And again, it's a very famous verse. Srila Prabhupada would quote this verse often. Sometimes he would just start the few words in a first line. Satam prasangam mamavir yasamvido. Sometimes he would just, whatever. Mostly he would just quote the Sanskrit. Anyway, so we'll start. Satam prasangam mamavir yasamvido. Satam prasangam mama virya samvido. Bhavanti hritkarna prasayana kata. Bhavanti hritkarna prasayana kata. Tajoshanad asva pavargavatmani. Tajoshanad asva pavargavatmani. Shraddha ratir bhakti anukramishyati. So we're going to come back to the Sanskrit. I want to do the word for word now so that you can make a connection of what we're saying and what's going on. Satam, I'll just read through, of pure devotees. Prasanga, through the association. So through the association of devotees. Mama, my, virya, wonderful activities. That's an important word, virya. Krishna, he likes to save his devotees. He likes to act wonderfully. He likes to attract our attention by his chivalrous. In Nectar Devotion, Virya is described as chivalrous activity. Samvidha, discussion of, bhavanti, become, prit, to the heart, karna, ear, from the ear to the heart, rasayana, pleasing, kata, the stories, tat, of that, joshana, by cultivation of those stories, asu, quickly, apavarga, of liberation, vartmani, on the path, shraddha, now here's the steps, shraddha, firm faith, rati, attraction, bhakti, devotion, anukramishati, krama, trivikrama, lord of 3 wonderful steps. Krama means steps. Anukramishati, will follow. So what will follow? By hearing of the glories of the Lord, shraddha, firm faith. That's the first thing that develops. Faith comes, then attraction, then bhakti. Shraddha, rati, bhakti, anukramishati will follow in succession. Okay, now back to the Sanskrit. Satam prasangam mama virya samvido.
Satam prasangam mama virya samvido.
Bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kata.
Bhavanti hritkarna rasayana.
Tajoshanav asvapa vargavatmani. Shraddha ratir bhakti anukramisyati. Please chant.
Satam prasangam mama virya samvido.
Satam prasangam mama virya samvido.
Bhavanti hritkarna rasayana tata.
Bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kata.
Tajoshanara shapavarga vartmani.
Tajoshanas asvapa vargavatmani.
Shraddha ratir bhakti anukramishati.
Shraddha ratir bhakti anukramishyati. Others?
Satam prasangan mama virya samvido.
Satam prasangam mama virya samvido.
Bhavanti kirkarna rasayana kata.
Bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kata.
Sajyasanad ashva apavarga vartmani.
Tajoshanan asvapa vargavatmani.
Shradharatir bhaktir anukramishati.
Shraddha ratir bhakti anukramishyati. One more.
Satam prasangam mama virya samvido.
Satam prasangam samvido.
Bhavanti hritkarna rasayana.
Bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kata.
Yosharanara Bhavatmani.
Tajoshanan asvapa vargavatmani.
Shraddha ratir bhakti anukramishati.
Shraddha ratir bhakti anukramishyati. So here's the translation. In the association of pure devotees, the discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. Hrit is the heart, karna is the ear. So it's very bhavanti hrit karna. And then there's this word rasayana. I'll come back. Sorry. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed. And his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin. So I'm going to go back now. I'm going to talk about. Okay. In the association of pure devotees, the discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. Bhavanti hrit karna rasayana kata. That pleasure, it's very pleasing to the, again, heart and the ear, and rasayana, Rasayana means pleasing, but are any of you familiar what Rasayana in Ayurveda is? Rasayana in the Ayurvedic medicinal program there. Rasayana is it's a mixture of the herbs, you know, whatever they're treating. They mix the herbs in ghee. And the thing about mixing herbs in ghee is that the herbs, after they're, let's say, sitting on the shelf, they don't deteriorate. They actually, the potency of the herbs, because it's mixed in ghee, it increases. So the potency of that rasayana increases. So that's, I thought, very interesting. It's medicinal paste, you know? And so this is the one of the points, that this mixture of hearing about Krishna's virya, his chivalrous activities, how he saves his devotees, what he did in that situation, his talks to Arjuna, so in any circumstance and in any incarnation, that's a rasayana. It's a healing medicine for us that increases, the medicine increases in potency. It doesn't become less. Just like Western culture, we pulverize the herbs and then that dry powder sits in a bag or in a bottle or in a capsule or whatever. But it deteriorates after exposure to time or air or different circumstances. It deteriorates. But in that rasayana, because it's mixed with the herbs and different, mixed with ghee, the base is ghee, and other herbs are there, potency increases. So that gives us a clue that by hearing, repeatedly hearing about the activities of the Lord and his devotees, the taste increases, and therefore one needs to repeatedly take that rasayana, that nectar, that medicinal cure. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed. So what's one freed from? Freed from what? Did you know you were in prison? Did you know that you need to be freed from something? Well, we hear that we need to be freed from our bodily concept of life, thinking that identifying with the body. We need to be freed from our ignorance. We need to be freed from so many things, and one gradually becomes freed by taking that mixture of hearing about the Lord. And then when that misconception of life and the goal of life and ourself, etc., when that becomes clear, then attraction becomes fixed. Then Shraddha, Ratir, Bhakti, Anuttamishati. Then real devotion, Shraddha, Shraddha's faith, but devotion and devotional service begin. Interesting, huh? Okay, so we can start the purport. I think if you don't mind, I'm just going to read the purport, since if you started, I'd interrupt you anyway, so that way you don't get interrupted, okay? Here's the purport by Srila Prabhupada. The process of advancing in Krishna consciousness and devotional service is described here. The first point is that one must seek the association of persons who are Krishna conscious and who engage in devotional service. Without such association, one cannot make advancement. What do you think about that? What strikes you about that? Well, wouldn't you think that if you, I'll answer my own question, but then you can do it too. Wouldn't you think that if you give somebody a book about Krishna consciousness, they're getting the nectar, they're getting etc., so that's all they need? Yes, what would you like to say?
I think I used to have a the belief that you can advance on your own. Like I used to think it's like an internal process you're doing, so you can do it anywhere. But I don't think like that as much anymore. But that's a common belief that
I can do it on my own.
Yeah.
I don't need anybody. It's a common belief. Yeah, that's one of the things we have to get freed from. Bruce, is that Bruce? Yeah. Thank you, Krishna. Bruce.
I don't know. I still feel like I don't agree with that statement.
Thanks for that honest reply. Yeah, it's a little challenging, isn't it? Without such association one cannot make advancement. Let's go on and then come back to this point, because a little bit will be more, a little more will be explained. But thank you for saying that, because that's also the thing that you think, oh, I have to have association. Okay, here. Prabhupada says, simply by theoretical knowledge or study, one cannot make any appreciable advancement. So it's true, one can make progress. In fact, if you think about how, we got a book or whatever, if that was our first contact with people or whatever, or indulging into the philosophy, there, by getting the book, and might have been stimulating in some way or other, but what happens is that it drives you to want to find out more, and because oftentimes the points are not easily understood, and that association with devotees who are similarly endeavoring on the path is very, very potent. Yes, Prabhu.
It makes me think that when you're studying it on your own, it's just theoretical knowledge, and they're not dead words on a paper, but they're less alive than being engaged in love and service with devotees. So you're actually experiencing Krishna's loving qualities by the association of your sangha compared to imagining it in your head. So
Good point. Yeah, like when we're reading on our own, etc., and we can be totally undisturbed, our mind can be equiposed and this and that. Then we get in the association of anybody, but in the association of devotees, then you have to practice those things. How to tolerate, how to this, how not to be disturbed, how to interact nicely. You have to put it into practice. So to have the theoretical understanding, it's important to have that there, but then the practical application of it, that's what we're doing here. That's what we do. I'm sure you're finding that out in the association here, that the practical application of what it means to live with devotees or live with other people, and then try to see everyone equally as a spirit soul, etc., and then we also become aware sometimes of our preconceived notions. Oh, this person's like that person's like that. Not necessarily that. They're a spirit soul that's endeavoring on the path also. So the theoretical knowledge is one thing, the practical application is a whole other thing. Okay, so Prabhupada continues. One must give up the association of materialistic persons and seek the association of devotees, because without the association of devotees, one cannot understand the activities of the Lord. That's the point. The point is, by the association of devotees, just like if one, say, last night you read something, one of Prabhupada's books, whatever, right? And then the next day or that day you share it with somebody, what you read. And then that sparks a conversation. It sparks and you know what I read? I read this and that. And then your bonding becomes very strong, and it become bonded on spiritual topics as opposed to whatever, materialistic topics. And that bond and that talking about Krishna, if you ever, I'm sure you've experienced it. Sorry, that was very sarcastic. When you experience that the taste of talking about Krishna, you'll see that actually this is a taste that I want to cultivate. And who else wants to hear about Krishna but somebody else who's on the path, And other people should want to hear about Krishna, and we also want to bring them to that point. But the point is relishing that exchange can be done with people of similar mentalities. Generally, people are convinced of the impersonal feature of the absolute truth. Because they do not associate with devotees, they cannot understand that the absolute truth can be a person and have personal activities. So that's also an important point too, because most people, in fact, even in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada explains in the purports that if you're just trying to figure out the nature of the material world through your own intelligence, the highest level of realization that you can come to is impersonal realization. It's very difficult to come to an understanding that God's a person through theoretical knowledge. But hearing from devotees about the personality of Godhead and his activities and seeing all of those examples in your life and expressing them. Oh, Krishna's so kind. He just arranged for this. Oh, Krishna this. And you know he's the taste of water. You know he's this. So many things like that. Seeing and hearing me and remembering Krishna's personality daily and minute by minute as much as one can. Then you're able to see him more and more. That's the thing. By hearing from the let's say Bhagavad Gita, right? So all those chapters where Krishna says, I'm the taste of water, I'm the light of the sun of the moon, of fishes I am the sharks, of mountains I am Meru. So many things he says about himself there. Then when we're seeing those things and experiencing those things, then we can remember, oh, I mean, how can we get along in a day that's 100 degrees without drinking water? And how can we drink water without remembering how Krishna is so kind to provide that pure taste of the water? You know, so Prabhupada would say, even if you just remember that Krishna is the taste of water, that's you're able to go back home to Godhead. Krishna will help you. He'll remember you for that kind thought. Even those little thoughts, they add up. Okay. This is a very difficult subject matter. Trying to understand that God's a person. That's a hard subject matter to understand. And unless one has personal understanding of the absolute truth, there's no meaning to devotion. Service or devotion cannot be offered to anything impersonal. Srila Prabhupada would say that often. And he would make the point how it's so much easier to become absorbed in the service of the personality of Godhead than it is to become absorbed in the impersonal aspect of the white light, this and that, the all-pervading energy. Or even he'll use the example of the universal form of the Lord. So what are you going to do with the universal form of the Lord? How are you going to offer anything to him? How are you going to but if you have the opportunity, and hopefully you'll take the opportunity to do some personal service to the deities here, by becoming absorbed in the deities and the service to the deities, then it's so much easier to fix your mind on that, to serve the Lord. He's a person. So I just saw a nice bunch of roses at Publix, 2 for 1. So I bought some and I brought them to the Lord because I'm thinking of him, you know. Whatever. I want to learn how to cook better so I can offer nice things to the Lord. It's so much easier to absorb your consciousness in service to a person than it is to an impersonal object. And by the process of devotional service and in the association of devotees, we can even see the Lord in stone, even in the stone, in the Shalagram Shila, in the Giriraj Shilas, you know, and a person can become absorbed. If you ever been to Madhava's house, you know, he's absorbed in the worship of his deities and his Shalagram Shila, and he decorates them so nicely every day, etc., etc. And that absorption in the service of the Lord means less absorption in the material energy. And that less absorption in the material energy means that the taste for Krishna and service to Krishna increases, and that taste for material activities decreases. And it happens automatically. I'm just going to read this part again. To understand the personal activities of the Lord, one has to seek the association of devotees. And by such association, when one contemplates and tries to understand the transcendental activities of the Lord, the path to liberation is open and he is freed. So that's, again, talking about, I skipped, sorry. I thought I read it again, but actually I skipped it up to there. Sorry. Did I miss a whole bunch? Maybe this moved on me.
Service
Okay, well, hold on that thought and go back up there. Thank you. Service must be offered to a person. Non-devotees cannot appreciate Krishna consciousness by reading Srimad Bhagavatam or any other Vedic literature where the activities of the Lord are described. They think these activities are fictional, manufactured stories, because spiritual life is not explained to them in the proper mood. So we have to understand this sentence in context too, because when one reads Srila Prabhupada's books, when he's explaining things in the proper mood, then one can get the initial attraction, initial faith that's needed through that. But oftentimes, if you're reading this version of the Ramayana or that Mahabharata or this story or that story, just, explained by a non-devotee, translated by a non-devotee, then it doesn't bring the same feelings in the heart up as it would when you hear from the proper source. That's a fundamental principle that Srila Prabhupada always talks about. Hear from the proper source. Just like we were hearing Madhurya Kadambini, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's book, Madhurya Kadambini, he was saying, beginning, he says, how is it that one develops bhakti? How is it that one develops bhakti or engages in bhakti? And he explains in the scriptures that one can't engage in bhakti unless one is already engaged in bhakti in a previous life, previous experience. So in order to be here now, it means that somehow or other, there's something in your past experiences that you engaged in some devotional service to the Lord, and now you're given the opportunity to again start. But that's kind of like a circular argument, because to have engaged in bhakti in your previous life means that's why you're engaged in this life. That's okay, but it doesn't really fully answer the question of how do you start bhakti. Bhakti starts by hearing from somebody who has bhakti. Because bhakti itself, bhakti, Devi, herself, itself, is independent. She's not dependent on this circumstance or that circumstance. But so how to get bhakti has to come from somebody who has bhakti. And somebody like Srila Prabhupada who has bhakti so strongly in their heart, they can, and others can, inject in nectar of devotion. The phrase is used, somebody who has bhakti can inject bhakti into the heart of the hearer through their sound, by the sound vibration. Goes through the ear to the heart. It's injected into the heart because they have that potency of bhakti. That's how we start. So therefore, this is why Srila Prabhupada is saying that just by reading on your own, yes, it can start. The process can start. But in order for it to fully fructify, to fully manifest, that's why the association of devotees is needed. And that might take different shapes and forms. It might take living in the ashram. It might take coming and associating here and there, etc., or hearing classes online or whatever. There's different ways that can take shape. But we can also appreciate that the most potent dosage is in a situation such as this, which is a great opportunity, in the association of devotees who are trying to cultivate 100% devotion to Krishna, 100% attention and devotion to Krishna. Proper mood. To understand the personal activities of the Lord, one has to seek the association of devotees. And by such association, when one contemplates and tries to understand the transcendental activities of the Lord, the path to liberation is open and he is free. So, to understand the personal activities, something I was going to say about it. Anyway, fell out a hole, sorry. There might be different things when we're reading, different things that we might come across that don't quite resonate with us, we don't quite understand. So that's in the association of devotees, it's easy to ask the question. Did you ever read this story? Did you ever hear this point? Can you help me try to understand it? You know, just like this point here that Prabhupada's saying, you can't make progress without the association of devotees. Well, you can make some progress. You can make some progress without the association of devotees. Oh, thank you. I just remembered what I was going to say. But Prabhupada says, I believe it's in the 4th canto, Prabhupada says, to think that one can make advancement outside, totally outside the association of devotees is a hallucination. He uses that word, hallucination. It's an hallucination. It's a dream to think that you can make it outside. And why is that? Because we need the association of devotees to encourage us. That's one thing. To correct us, that's another thing. To keep us on the path, you know, to be inspired by their association to keep us on the path. In the story of Jada Bharat, if you remember that story, or Bharat Maharaj, we'll start with you first before that. Bharat Maharaj. So Bharat Maharaj, saintly personality and also a powerful king. So he was a Raja Rishi. He was Raja, he was the king of the world, and he was also very saintly. So at a very young age, even though he was ruling the kingdom, even though he was ruling the whole kingdom, it might have been the whole world, minor detail that I don't remember, but anyway, big kingdom, he developed a great sense of renunciation and renounced the world at a very young age. Very young age. He still had children at home, a wife, etc. He had all his opulence, etc., etc. Goes to the forest, and that's a very noble thing. And he's there, and he's meditating, and he's making progress. He made progress up to the point of bhava. Bhava is the preliminary stage for prema, Krishna prema, pure love of Godhead. So up to that state of bhava, approaching pure love of Godhead, he would do different fire judges and different method of sadhana at that time, the appropriate method of sadhana for that time and age. And he would be having tears of ecstasy come down his eyes in love, you know. And then the story goes about the lion who roars and the deer that's nearby drinking water, and the pregnant deer jumps over, etc. And then he rescues the deer. He rescues the deer, and he becomes, you know, and why does, an interesting point, why does he rescue the deer? Because he has a Kshatriya Bhav. Kshatriya Bhav, the king, he's a protector. There's an innocent little animal, helpless little animal there, and his desire and his mood of protecting, he just grabs the animal, you know, an innocent, noble thing to do. He could do it. It wasn't a big thing. He could do it. He grabbed, and he took care of that deer. But what happened was that the distraction of taking care of the deer increased and increased, and his attraction or his focus on his sadhana decreased because he got an ever increasing attraction or distraction for that deer. And because he was by himself, there wasn't anybody to say, you know, Prabhu, that's a little too much, you know. Take care. It's a good thing that you rescued the deer. It's a good thing. Now Krishna's in control. Krishna will take care of him, and you keep focused on your sadhana. Don't become overly focused on the deer. But somehow, because there was no association to help him adjust his mentality, he became overly attracted to the deer, and you know, he still made progress and he still achieved perfection, but it took a lot longer because he was outside. And then after the deer body, even in the deer body, he had learned a lesson. So he went back to the ashram, near the ashram where he had been living, but he stayed in an ashram that had other sages at. He just ate their dried leaves, remnants, you know. And then when he got back to a human form of life in his third birth, then he didn't associate with any materialistic persons. But even as a deer, he kept in the association of saintly persons. So just a little bit more. One who has firm faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes fixed, and his attraction for the association of the Lord and the devotees increases. Association with the devotees means association with the Lord. Association with devotees means association with the Lord. The devotee who makes this association develops the consciousness for rendering service to the Lord, and then being situated in the transcendental position of devotional service, he gradually becomes perfect. So any thoughts and comments or questions or discussions that you want to have on that point? Yes. And then
Just in this one?
whatever, no, either one, all points.
Thank you very much for the class. Something in regards to what Bruce mentioned and the challenge of accepting the fact that we can't make it alone. As we accept the personhood and the help of people around us, there's also a risk of that we are running of being hurt along the path, because except impersonal, there's no risk. It's way more convenient, and I don't have to go through suffering. What to speak of suffering of purification? So, because we know that people that we love the most, he can also hurt us the most.
Yeah. So
we are very, very cautious in terms of giving our heart. So how can we encourage one to, despite of all the hurt, all the suffering, still need to give it a chance and pretty much mature, grow up, because to make an error, to make a mistake, the error is human. So natural, we're gonna make mistakes and hurt others, and vice versa. We're gonna be hurt too.
Yeah, right.
So how can we get familiar with forgiveness? Forgiving, and just let's start it over. To give it a chance, let's start over.
Yeah. Well, thank you. One thing is to understand, one aspect is to understand that in the association of devotees, let me say it this way. Sometimes we're receiving our karmic due from different things that we have done. And when we're in the association of devotees, sometimes the association, the people we're associating with are the instruments of hurt, or instruments of something that we've done in the past that we need to purify our heart of. Okay, we have some reactions in the past, just like human life means we have so much in this particular lifetime. We have so much good karma and so much bad karma to burn off. Okay, so the mix is there. And how do we get that? We get it through interaction of people. And if the people that we're interacting with for the majority of the part are devotees, then they're going to come. It's going to come through them. So Srila Prabhupada sometimes would say, don't be upset with the instrument of your karma. Don't be upset with that person who said those hurtful words to us, but taking that as an example, okay? That person, that devotee who said some hurtful words to us, it's an instrument of our karma. And if we realize that, oh, I must have done something in my past life that now I'm suffering that hurt. And we just read in my little reading group on Prabhupada Lilamrita, there was a circumstance with Srila Prabhupada just to this point, this aspect of the point, that some devotees, it was in the West, it wasn't in India, it was in the West, I don't know, but anyway, some devotees had met an Indian gentleman who was very favorable, very nice, so they brought him in, they were cultivating, etc., etc. So Prabhupada was at the temple, they brought him in to meet Srila Prabhupada, they had a very nice exchange. The man was very respectful, very nice, etc., etc. So then at that place where Prabhupada was, they had arranged an outside engagement for Prabhupada to speak at a Catholic high school, I believe. And Srila Prabhupada went with a few of the devotees, including this gentleman, and Srila Prabhupada was speaking about Krishna consciousness and Krishna, obviously, etc., etc. And at the end of the lecture, the man stood up in the public assembly and criticized Srila Prabhupada, this Indian gentleman, criticized Srila Prabhupada for speaking about Krishna to assembly of persons who were interested in Christ. They're putting their faith in Christ, and one shouldn't try to impose their thoughts on someone else, etc., etc. And the devotees were quite shocked at the man's speech because he hadn't indicated anything like that previously. So he criticized Prabhupada very heavily, publicly, and Prabhupada didn't even reply. Didn't reply or counteract anything. Then the devotees, of course, one would imagine that some of the devotees would have gotten on the guy's case, right, afterwards. Why did you say that? That was offensive, or whatever they said. And so the man stopped coming, and Prabhupada noticed after a few days, he noticed that he wasn't coming. And he said, "Where's Mr. I think his name was Mukherjee. Where is he?" And they said, "Prabhupada, he was so offensive, he shouldn't come." He said, "No." Prabhupada said, "I must have done something to hurt him in my previous life, and he now is just giving it back to me." That was like, wow. And Prabhupada wanted to encourage him. But to get it, so in our interactions with the devotees, and that there might be some hurtful thing, how to get beyond that, how to go beyond forgiveness, because the association of devotees will remind us of those different nuances of karma, of humility, of forgiveness, and all those things. Then we can put the situation, or try to put the situation in a proper perspective that's not hurtful, that's philosophical, that we can understand. Oh, yeah, I did that. That's just a few thoughts on that. Is that okay? Prabhu in the back, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Yes, like positive feedback loop. It's a positive feedback loop of association with the devotees just leads to more association, just leads to more connection with the Lord, just leads to more association with the devotees, etc.
Yes, and you can understand Advaita Prabhu's point too, that if you have association with devotees and you get hurt, then the tendency is just like, I don't want to continue. It's hard to keep giving your heart or have that faith. So we have to take them both there and, in perspective. Yeah, they're both there. Yes, Prabhu.
There's a story via Prabhupada Priya. She gave the analogy of the polishing stones, where you put them in a tumbler and then the stones would rub up against each other.
That's a great one.
And they would come out polished, but without that friction and tension, without difficulty and confrontation, you never really become polished. And I like what you said, that Prabhupada said is an instrument of my karma. So it's just like, whatever I did, I'm sorry, I'm not even sure. Because you're not even aware that you could be hurting somebody. Like I could just be like, "Oh, nice hat." And like they're having a really bad day, and that could have been the thing that just like sent them over the edge. But I thought of Prabhupada Priya when you were telling the story.
Nice. And so let's just say, so all those stones in the tumbler, they're all little devotee stones. That's the association of devotees. So you get that tumbling, jostling effect. But if the association is mixed, then you get a materialistic perspective also, which doesn't help purify the heart. So that's the downside. So and the upside is okay. If it's the devotees that I'm associating with primarily, then I'm getting that perspective. That's a totally, obviously different perspective from when a materialistic personality who doesn't have any understanding of the Lord or karma or this or that or previous lives or anything, or personality of Godhead, how kind he is. Just like what some devotees reaction something bad happens, some of them immediately say, "Oh, Krishna's so kind." Yeah, I smashed my car. Krishna's so kind. Because, like, how do you go that? You know? Oh well, because I smashed my car. Krishna showed me that I'm not that I could die at any minute. I smashed my car. Krishna said I'm taking care. You know what I mean? You can get that feedback. But smash the car if in a person, they're thinking, yeah, maybe now you can sue the guy. Maybe this, you know what I mean? Whatever, it's just like, Dan got me 4 million, and smiling. Because, yeah, some thoughts. Yes. Nishta. Firm faith. Shraddha, Rati, Bhakti, and Nishta.
Thank you so much for class. I feel like there's a lot of things I needed to hear. I'm wondering, this is in reference to myself, someone in a neophyte stage that's still, growing their seed of bhakti, and, some devotee just continuously, keeps, hurting you and offending you. Is it okay to, distance yourself from them for your own, because accepting what's favorable, rejecting what's unfavorable. But I guess maybe you can speak more internally forgiving them and just kind of move on.
That's a very nice question, very practical application question, and surprisingly enough, a few years ago at a Govardhan retreat in Govardhan, Satyananda Maharaj talked about this very same thing. And he was saying that in his experience, his personal experience, there was a person that he was very close to, and they had a nice relationship, etc. And then that person, for some whatever reason, turned on him and did a whole bunch of, online criticism and this and that and this and that, etc. And he said, so because the topic had been about forgiveness. That was the gist of the topic was about forgiveness, forgiving people when they hurt. And so he said, so sometimes there's occasions like if you have a relationship with a person where there's a constant, hurt, they go off and say whatever, and then they come back and say, I'm really sorry, or they don't even say they're really sorry, but they just continue on as if nothing really had happened. Jai Shishikoni Taiki Jai. He said, so sometimes, he said, yes. He said, you can forgive. He said, and then he said, and I am of the opinion, and might criticize me for this, that sometimes people need psychological counseling when it's like that. It's not that we have to accept erratic behavior, etc., but it's also quite natural that you don't want to give your heart over and over again so that it will be, or give your heart or reveal your heart so that it can be, used again. So that distances, that happens sometimes for certain. But then, like you said, the cultivation of, at this particular point in my progress and in their state of consciousness, better that we're not so together. Yes, Baruch. I think we might end with this because otherwise, there's nobody here to pull me away. But anyway, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is very practical, applicable class. I was thinking about growing in devotee association, an advancement towards like your relationship with God, and just my path, and I've seen similar people's path. It's like before you come into devotee association, there is a progression, before you come into bhakti yoga. So you're still even if it's like experimental. I remember just sometimes walking out in the woods with the Bible and talking to the sun and journaling, and I didn't know what to do in order to really channel the spiritual experience I was having, and then sought out the devotees. Bhakti yoga systematics helps you to apply everything.
Yes.
And then the devotee association Krishna works through people, and just like skyrockets, and So but then I think, that's because I'm immersed we're right now all immersed in ashram life, full-time devotional service that's ordained by Srila Prabhupada. So we just, get on like the rocket ship. And but there will come a time, when life just changes, and it won't be, we're not staying here forever. So as then what do we do when you know life happens? And
And you go on in
Yes,
your
ma'am.
career or
yes, ma'am.
next stage of life, married life. Then point being is we have to be centered what our goal is. So if we're centered in what our goal is to become Krishna conscious, then we can continue on with our career. It doesn't mean that a person can only, obviously, live in the ashram. So you can go on with your career, but you want to mold your career and your choice of job and your location of job so that you can continue. You could be near a temple. You can be or if that's not possible, whatever, then you can continue at least associating online. In other words, association of devotees directly in the ashram is very important, and then even in the next stage or other stages of life, it's very important. So you have to think ahead, or how to do that, how to mold your life so that you will get association of devotees. Maybe not 24/7, but as much as possible. So and that's why Prabhupada Prabhupada didn't establish ISKCON ashrams, international ashram for Krishna consciousness. He's a society. So that has people in different stages and circumstances and different phases of life, etc. And they're all supporting each other in that sense, supporting at least philosophically, association like that type of support. So it is possible. It is possible at different stages of life. But one lesson is take advantage of the time that you have now, because it's really a really golden opportunity. And the other is that keep focused so that you don't make or you can that you try to make choices that will still foster your Krishna consciousness. It's possible. It's harder, but it is possible. Just like, you could say, just like you look at the situation of the Alachua temple. The temple's there in the center, but there's so much going on in the, there's a couple of new developments that are being built in Alachua, and the street isn't even halfway finished of the first, say 25 houses that are in that development. And already there's 14 families, devotees living on that street. 14 out of 20. Like, hello. That's like a new Hare Krishna little development. You know what I mean? But, so like that. In fact, one girl was having a housewarming ceremony. So I went over to her house for the first time, and I saw a devotee standing in the driveway, and I aimed for that driveway, figuring that's where it was. He said, no, it's the other house. That was one of the houses where, so many people lived on that street already. So it's like that. Yeah. So if there's that take-home lesson, the lesson is association is really important. So try to cultivate that association. Try to contribute to the association by discussing about Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam, and memorize the verse. That's a really good